All right, it's that time again, time for another Sunday video. And if you're a Gen Xer like me, this video is gonna be near and dear to your heart. So let's get to it. Now before we get too far down the trail, we have 100 Corporals Corner 8-inch stainless steel skillets with that classic removable handle dropping to my website as we speak. Big disclaimer, in about 7 weeks, we're gonna discontinue this model and make room for something else. So if you're saving to get one, grab them now. That's corporalscorner.com, and that link is located in my video description box. Jump on it, they go quick. And while you're there, don't forget to grab a skillet bag and patch. Once again, it's corporalscorner.com, and that link is located in my video description box. Now for today's video, we're gonna do a gear loadout from the popular movie in 1986 called Stand By Me. If you're my age or older and you're a Gen Xer, that movie is near and dear to your heart. It's about, in a nutshell, 4 best friends at the age of 12. They take off in 1959 to go find a kid that was hit by a train. They're rumored of it anyways. And they get into a big adventure and they become closer and they learn things about each other. And then at the very end of the movie, one of the boys grows up, writes a book about it, and tells how they drifted apart even though they were brought together. It's a great coming of age movie. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. The book is great as well. Now, disclaimer, this video today with a gear loadout is going to evolve and we're gonna see where it goes. But we're gonna base it off of the movie, and here's why. Most people have seen the movie. People read, people watch movies, some do both. But what I found is, for myself, over the years, I prefer to watch the movie because I enjoy the creativity, especially back in that era with no CGI. How did they do this? How did they do that? And they took the book and certain things that a writer's trying to convey in his mind, and when you read it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. But it might look better on film if we portray it in the essence of that, but add this. We'll add moonlight, or we'll add, animals over here, or we'll omit this detail and add these things over here. So what I tried to do was take the movie, because most people have seen the movie over the book. And for those that are hardcore Stephen King fans, and some people have claimed that the movie adaptations butcher them. I watched an interview where Stephen King actually said the director, to date at that time, was the best adaptation of his book. So he was happy with it. So that's why I'm gonna use the movie. Now, another disclaimer, there's no actual gear loadout shown in that movie. They don't break open their pack and say, I've got this, I have this. Throughout the entire movie, they're reaching and grabbing things, pulling things, sometimes announced, sometimes not. And when it's not, it's all of a sudden you just see them using this, or they're doing X, Y, and Z, and you're like, well, where'd that come from? So yet it's assumed that it's in their backpacks, in their pockets. They have this for food, they brought that, they didn't bring this. Now keep in mind, a lot of things that you would think should be there are not. And watching the director, who just passed away recently, was found dead in his house, has stated several times that he wanted to omit certain things. There's actually a detail in the movie where they get into an argument about who brought food. And it's assumed this was your idea, so we figured you would have handled it. So it's kind of like the blame game, but they're 12 years old. They're gonna just pick up and go. They're gonna grab a blanket, grab a sleeping bag, grab a backpack. One kid has a canteen. One kid has a military canteen. One kid has a backpack, you never see what's in it, right? So it's just assumed in a 12-year-old mindset, we're gonna just grab things and go, but nothing's thought out. And that's part of the movie, what makes it special for that era. And most 12-year-olds think that way. They don't plan things out, they just go do, they're impulsive. So that's what made this movie awesome. And I had to do some detective work to actually find the items that they had. and then what's available now versus 1959. But we got it done. So on that note, let's break this pack open and get her done. One last detail. There is a firearm, and I'll talk about it and I'll briefly show it. But we all know the YouTube game. I'm not going to wave guns around or fire guns on my channel. If so-and-so does it, go watch so-and-so. I have enough problems as it is, and I don't need more. So the first item we're going to talk about is a backpack. Now, once again, I'll mention this several times in the video. There's no actual gear loadout or close-ups of the items the boys are carrying. You'll see them in the distance. You'll see the boys walking by with a backpack, and one of them has a backpack on that resembles this one right here. And I know it's this one right here because there's a brief shot, I'll show it to you here, where you can see, and it's not even clear, but you can see a logo right there in the center. You can also see these metal D-rings here on the sides, and the shoulder strap D-rings and clip at the bottom. So I know this is a Boy Scout number 573 haversack. These were popular 40s, 50s, and 60s. This one right here is probably a later model, probably in the 40s. It was modeled after the World War I haversack backpacks that the military carried in the First World War, and they kind of adopted it. And again, it was popular for several decades. This one here was the only one I could find for about $25, and it's not complete. It's missing the straps on the sides. And what that was for was you could actually hang a bedroll underneath the flap, and it would tie into the sides where the D-rings were. Now, in that movie, the boys are not carrying it that way. Some have bedrolls slung over the shoulder, and some have an actual sleeping bag. And some have nothing. But the backpack's full, so you assume there's some sort of blanket in there. And later on in the movie, you see him with a blanket. So, overall, for a 12-year-old, obviously in that movie, he was a Boy Scout or had access to one of these. Fits him perfectly. It actually looks pretty large on him. Somebody like me, I can barely get the thing on. Next item on the list is a wool blanket, a twin size wool blanket. And I'm gonna go with a twin because they're 12-year-olds, and this is probably large enough to cover them. It's actually large enough to cover me if done properly. And again, some had blankets, some had sleeping bags. The time of the year where it takes place in the movie, they're talking about seeing you in junior high. So it's late summer, probably late August, early September, and it's not that cold, so a wool blanket, perfectly fine. They have a shoulder strap made from some type of, it looks like cotton cordage. This is a clothesline, and there's one of 100 ways to attach it. I'll show you what I did, and then you can go ahead and try that out. If it works for you, perfect. All it is a cow hitch or lark's head knot here and here, and it cinches down while it's around or over your shoulders. Now take your cordage, go underneath, and give yourself some slack, enough to tie your cow hitch. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cross over this, make an X. I'm going to go underneath. Then we're going to cross over. Then we're going to go up and back through. And those that follow my channel, you're going to see that that's a lark's head knot. And then just pull it tight. And you can leave it just like this, or you can actually tie an overhand knot around it. As long as there's tension on it, it should never come undone. Now we'll do the same thing to this side over here. Cross over, go underneath, cross over again, go up, and then back through. And this one here, I won't tie it off, I'll leave it so you can actually see that in either case, as long as tension's on it, it's not going to become unraveled. And the tighter you make this, the more slack you're going to have to go across your body. And again, as long as you have tension on this, meaning the weight of the blanket with that cordage across my body, it's never going to become unraveled. This one's not tied off, and this one is. And neither one is going to slip, and I can continue tightening this down if I choose to. Now we have two canteens that are shown in that movie. One is now keep in mind this is 1959, and we have two canteens that are shown in the movie. I found it odd that they showed the Boy Scout backpack or haversack, but they didn't use a Boy Scout canteen. The first canteen is a stainless steel 1 quart US military canteen. Now you gotta stop and think, 2 quarts of water for 4 boys over a 2.5 day period, that's not good. However, at least they had something, right? And being that it's stainless steel, if you watch my channel, any type of stainless steel container, you can actually collect water and boil that water so it's disinfected. Once it cools down, you have it for later. Now, none of that was shown in the video, but you can rightfully assume that they can go ahead and do that. They even did a water crossing in that movie as well. So, pretty simple. Plastic lid. You can actually take this chain off. We have a canteen cover and a US military web belt. Now the second canteen. The color scheme is incorrect, but they had something similar back in 1959, and that was just a standard, I mean, nowadays they're actually garbage. And once you open it up and you smell it, you get that plasticky smell. You know, some were stainless steel, but it just simply went over your shoulder, and it held a little more than a quart, slightly more than a quart, probably around 1 liter. And one of the boys had this as well. So again, this is round down, 2 quarts of water between 4 people, and you know, is what it is, but at least they had something. When we first come across the 4 boys, they're actually in a treehouse all together, playing cards, talking crap, and smoking stolen cigarettes. Later on in the movie, they talk about jacking some of the Winstons from his father, who's a drunk. Those are not Winstons. And even further in the movie, we see them lighting a cigarette after they've eaten with matches. Again, none of this stuff is actually shown, just bits and pieces here and there. And going through the whole detective work, you actually can see what they have and when it's used. So the fact that they have cigarettes and matches, it's rightfully so to assume that they used the matches to light their campfire that they had that night, in which they used to cook their food. So they had light, they had the ability to get a fire, they had canteens where they could collect water and actually disinfect that water. They had blankets that they could sleep in and stay warm. Keep in mind, it's late summer, early fall, you know. They had a backpack where they could carry more items, and pretty much they were set. Now, entertainment. Back then, we didn't have cell phones. Very few people had televisions. And if you're lucky, you had a house phone. So most people listened to the radio. There's radios in every single home. And at that time, they tried to do that 1950s, you know, slimming things down, the rocket ship, the fins on the cars, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing they were able to actually scale down were transistor radios. And I believe 2 or 3 times throughout the movie, they actually make reference to it. And one was when they're walking on the train tracks. Another time is that evening. And I think early on, it just has music playing. but the radio is referenced at least 2 or 3 times in there, at a minimum. Either said, hey, get the radio out, or you just hear music playing. But this right here is a replica of a 1950s transistor radio, complete with USB port for today's economy. But it comes on.
These statutes are unconstitutional.
There we go. And $2.37, complete with Vern's 7 cents. As he spent the entire summer digging under his porch looking for a jar of pennies that he had buried and had a map to find them. But unfortunately, his mom cleaned his room a week later and tossed the map out. So the poor kid's underneath there sweating to death, got about 100 holes dug trying to find that jar of pennies. And all he could scrape together was 7 cents. But this goes back to that 12-year-old mentality. They had pocket change with them. They go to the store and they're able to get hamburger meat, at least a pound, for $1.50. In addition to that, they bought some more items. We'll talk about food here in a minute. But it just goes to show that any store USA today, the cheapest meat you can find, garbage meat for a pound of hamburger meat, is like between $4 and $5. And last but not least, we have a comb. Poor kid that brought it had a buzz cut, but his heart was bigger than his mouth, and he brought it for them because they had hair, and ended up losing it on the train tracks. However, it is what it is, and it's the item we can add to our kit. Now, for the last item on the list, I'm going to briefly show you mine. It is a reproduction of a 1911 .45 pistol. Holds 8 rounds in the mag and 1 in the chamber. Gives you 9 altogether. These were popular in World War I, World War II, and to my knowledge, all branches of the military actually carried this until the 9mm Beretta came out. And I know there's arguments between stopping power and blah, 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 blah. Write a comment in the comment section of what you prefer, because I want to hear about it. However, as with everything else, it's lightweight with the most rounds, and that's why the military switched over. And they carried that for several decades as well. And you know, it is what it is. But one of the boys has a drunk father, steals his Winston cigarettes, and his 1911. So, is what it is. At least they had a way to actually protect themselves. And later in the movie, don't want to give anything away to those that haven't seen it, it actually works out for them. Just to give you an idea of what $2.37 actually bought in 1959 versus today, 4 Cokes were actually purchased. Minimum 1 pound of meat and hamburger buns. Now we'll talk about one other item potentially was bought, wasn't shown or talked about, and it wasn't even actually shown what that item was. But they have a conversation in the morning about breakfast. Now, today's economy, one of these with the original recipe minus the cocaine, meaning actual sugar being inside here, was $3.25 just for one of these. So $2.37 won't even buy one of these. You know, this was a cheaper version of meat that I found, 80% lean, 20% fat, made by Catelli. I believe it was from Walmart, and it was $4.50. So that right there is $8. And these were the cheapest hamburger buns, were like $1.25. And then you add tax to that. So just to have a crappy meal, no cheese, no condiments, nothing else, you're talking probably 12 to 13 bucks versus $2.37. Okay, so we talked about breakfast. That next morning as they're walking to that location, leaving their campsite, and they're probably a couple hours away from where the dead body is going to be at. All four are shown walking the train tracks, and they have their hands cupped like this, and they're picking something out of their hands and they're eating it. Never says what it is. All four of them just aren't happy with it. They're like, we wish you would have gotten something else. And when the kid, who's a smart aleck, says, you know, couldn't buy much with Vern's 7 cents, right? And that's kind of where it leaves off at. And then it shows them walking off. But they're all going like this. Now you can assume it's leftover hamburger meat, maybe it is, but it's what's not stated or reading between the lines. Looking at their fingers, they got a bluish color. One boy has a dark stain on his shirt, another one has it on his pants. This movie takes place late summer, early fall in Oregon. Now those that are from Oregon and the Washington area, because pretty much it's the same, it connects. Anywhere you go out there, it's actually a nuisance plant and an invasive species. You have huge Himalayan blackberries everywhere. So being that they're in that area, these grow on the sides of highways, freeways, train tracks, out in the brush, kind of like how briars do out here. They're everywhere, and they're huge. These things are, I mean, they're probably an inch, inch and a half in length. And they leave that bluish coloring all over your body, stain, right? So you can assume at their campsite, they foraged in the morning, grabbed them, and that was their quick breakfast. While arguing about how he should have bought, with 7 cents, cherry flavored Pez and Twinkies, right? And root beer. However, with that said, the night before, one of the boys tells a story about lard ass and blueberry pies. Now, he could have made that whole story up. He was very creative and becomes a writer when he's an adult. However, a lot of things boost or start your creativity. What if with that 7 cents, he purchased blueberries at that store, it just wasn't shown. That was in his head, and he took that one detail and created an entire story from it. So this can go either way. I couldn't find an interview about it. I couldn't find any other details or deleted scenes. So I'm assuming it's one or the other or both. To my knowledge, I don't know if wild blueberries just grow out in Oregon. Maybe they do. But I know for a fact Himalayan blackberries are there everywhere. You can't walk anywhere in a state park, land, walk a freeway. They're there. There's companies that actually come out and actually burn these things because there's so much of them. And I'm going to assume it was something that they picked or foraged at their campsite, get that quick sugar, fill their stomach, get that energy, and get them down those tracks to that dead body. That right there, pretty much in a nutshell, is what they were carrying. And it was spread load between 4 different boys. At no point in that movie, even with deleted scenes, do they stop and go, junk on the bunk, empty your packs out, let's see what you guys got. It's just, you see this frame here and that scene there. Off in the distance, you see this. The camera backs up, there's 4 boys at campfire, and you see a match being lit as he's lighting a cigarette for one of the boys. But what kind of matches, how many? Were they waterproof? What did they do? You know, what brand? Never shown. So just doing the detective work and sitting there watching it about 2 or 3 times, taking notes, you can piece all this together. Then again, assuming what time of year it is, you know, where they're at in the United States, what grows there, things like that. So I did the best that I could. One thing I'm surprised with, they showed the Boy Scout backpack. One could assume that they were in the Boy Scouts. Where's the pocket knife? You know, where's the Boy Scout canteen at? You know, where's a flashlight or a lantern? All those things existed then and were used, you know, compass. But again, the director wanted 12-year-old mindset. We get an idea, 4 best friends. This sounds cool. we're going to go do it in the year 1959. Now let's fast forward to 1985. A bunch of best friends, 12 to 13 years old, hopping on their bikes, going out for an adventure, not planning nothing, just getting in it. Some had backpacks, some didn't, some had gear, most didn't. The Goonies, right? So that same mindset has been consistent throughout. And I'm willing to bet it's the same today. Mindless 12-year-olds having a good time. And that's what they should be doing. So on that note, let's go ahead and get out of here. With that, all the gear in my videos can be found in one spot. My website, corporalscorner.com. Now don't forget, we have 100 Corporals Corner skillets dropping as we speak to my website, and that link is located in my video description box. Now please do me that favor, hit that like and subscribe button, then ring that notification bell. Once you ring that bell, please select all notifications. And as always, thank you for your comments, views, and support. Thanks for watching. Get out in the field, have some fun. I'm gonna catch you next time.